The dining room smelled like roasted garlic and fresh-cut roses, and somewhere in the background, a jazz record was playing low enough to feel sophisticated, but loud enough to mask the sound of my own heartbeat. The Hargrove family estate sat on 12 acres outside of Charleston, and every time I walked through those iron gates, I told myself I was walking toward the life I had always wanted. That evening, I believed it. My name is Sarah, and I was 31 days away from becoming a Hargrove. I had spent the better part of 3 years building something real with Marcus. We met at an industry conference in Atlanta. I was presenting a residential design project. He was there representing his family's commercial real estate firm. He was charming in the way that people who grow up with money often are, effortless, easy with a smile, never obviously trying. I was drawn in before I had time to think twice about it. By our second date, I was already imagining what our apartment would look like. By our first anniversary, we were talking about buying a house together. I want to be clear about something, because it matters to everything that comes after. I was not naive about money. I had worked since I was 19. I put myself through architecture school on a combination of scholarships, student loans I paid off in 4 years, and weekend waitressing shifts that I don't particularly miss. By the time I was 28, I had a salary most of my college friends envied and a savings account I had built from nothing. When Marcus and I decided to buy our home in Mount Pleasant, I brought $150,000 to the table. He brought $30,000. We agreed the title would reflect equal ownership. I know how that sounds now. At the time, I told myself that it was an investment in our future together. I loved him, and love has a way of making uneven things feel balanced. The engagement dinner was his mother's idea. She wanted to celebrate properly, she said. She wanted to welcome me into the family the right way. It would be intimate. Just immediate family, she promised. When I arrived that Thursday evening, I counted 14 people around the table. His father sat at the head, the way he always did, with the particular stillness of a man who is used to rooms reorganizing themselves around him. His sister, older than Marcus by 6 years, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who can make a compliment feel like a threat, was seated directly across from me. His mother floated in and out of the kitchen with that practiced warmth that I had spent 2 years trying to read correctly and never quite could. Marcus was next to me, his hand finding mine under the table when I first sat down. I remember thinking that was a good sign. Dinner was lovely. The food was extraordinary. People asked me questions about the wedding venue, about my dress, about whether we had settled on a honeymoon destination. I felt, for the first hour, genuinely happy. I laughed at stories I had already heard. I complimented the centerpieces. I was present and warm and exactly the version of myself that I had rehearsed for occasions like this one. Then his father stood up. He did it slowly, the way people do when they want everyone in the room to notice before they speak. He lifted his wine glass and the table quieted. I assumed a toast. I was already composing my expression into something grateful and a little emotional, the way you do when someone says something unexpectedly kind. He was not about to say something kind. He thanked everyone for coming. He talked about the Hargrove name, what it had meant for 4 generations, what it would mean for 4 more. He talked about the importance of family unity, about how every person at that table was a steward of something larger than themselves. And then he reached under his chair and placed a manila folder on the table. He slid it across to me. I looked at Marcus. He was looking at his plate. Inside the folder was a 7-page document titled Hargrove Family Partnership Agreement, New Member Addendum. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that my name was already printed on the signature line at the bottom of page 7. I started reading. The room had shifted into a kind of polite silence that felt practiced, like everyone had known this moment was coming except me. I read slowly, because the language was dense, and I am the kind of person who reads every word of a contract, even the ones that bore me. By page 2, I understood that I was being asked to co-sign as a guarantor on 2 of the family's commercial properties that, according to footnotes I had to squint to read, carried a combined outstanding loan balance of $412,000. My hand did not shake. I am proud of that. I set the document down flat on the table and looked at his father. and I asked, very calmly, what this was. He smiled the way people smile when they believe a question is unnecessary. He explained that it was standard practice. Every member who married into the family signed something similar. It was about alignment, he said, about demonstrating shared commitment to the family's financial legacy. Sarah becomes a Hargrove. The Hargroves protect Sarah. That was how he phrased it. I asked whether Marcus had co-signed anything like this before we purchased our home together. Silence. I asked it again, not unkindly, because I genuinely wanted to understand. Had Marcus, as a Hargrove, co-signed a personal guarantee on anything related to my finances or my career before asking me to buy a house with him? His sister set her fork down. She said something about how that was a different situation, which was not an answer. His mother said perhaps we could discuss the specifics later, which was also not an answer. His father cleared his throat and said that he understood it could feel overwhelming at first glance, but that family required trust, and this was simply a formal expression of that trust. I looked at the document again. $412,000. My name already printed in ink. I asked if I could have a few days to have my attorney review it before signing anything. The temperature in the room dropped by approximately 10 degrees. His father said he did not see why that would be necessary, that this was a family matter, not a legal transaction. His sister said that bringing an attorney into a family dinner felt like a statement of distrust. His mother said nothing but looked at Marcus with an expression I could not fully decode from where I was sitting. Marcus, for his part, said that he thought I was overthinking it. I heard that sentence and I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter. Something that felt, if I am being honest, like recognition. I excused myself to use the restroom. I stood over the sink in their guest bathroom for 4 minutes. I looked at my own face in the gilded mirror. I had driven 40 minutes to get here. I was wearing a dress I had purchased specifically for this dinner. My name was already printed on a signature line I had never agreed to sign. I took out my phone and texted my best friend, who also happened to have passed the South Carolina bar exam 2 years prior, a photo of pages 1, 2, and 7 of the document. I typed, "I need you to look at this tonight. Don't call, just read." Then I walked back to the table and I sat down and I finished my dinner. I did not sign anything. Driving home, Marcus told me I had embarrassed him. He said his family had put a lot of thought into the dinner, that his father had only been trying to formalize what was already understood, that I was making something complicated out of something that was meant to be loving. I listened. I asked one question. Did he know about the document before tonight? He said his father had mentioned something about paperwork. I said goodnight when we reached my building. I kissed him on the cheek. I went upstairs and I sat in my kitchen and I waited for my best friend to call. She called at 11:43. The first thing she said was, "Sarah, do not sign that." She walked me through it. The 2 commercial properties were not simply financed. They were over-leveraged, she said. One of them had a balloon payment coming due in 18 months that the loan structure made extremely difficult to refinance. If that property defaulted, anyone listed as a guarantor would be personally liable. She said she would need to pull the full records to be certain. But based on what I had sent her, signing that document would mean putting my own financial life, my savings, potentially my home, at risk for debts I had nothing to do with creating. I asked her about the house. Our house, the one where I had contributed $150,000 to a man who brought 30. She asked if we had a cohabitation agreement or a written record of the contribution split. I said no. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." The next morning, I did not call Marcus right away. I went to my office. I pulled every document I had related to our home purchase. Bank statements, the wire transfer confirmation, the closing disclosure, every email thread in which the financial arrangement had been discussed. I organized them into a folder. I sent copies to my best friend. Then I called Marcus and told him I wanted to meet for lunch. He arrived looking hopeful, which told me he thought I had reconsidered. I told him I loved him. I meant it. I told him I had spent the better part of 3 years believing we were building something honest together and that I needed him to tell me truthfully. whether he had understood the contents of that document before his father presented it to me at a dinner table surrounded by 14 people without a single word of warning. He said his father had explained it was a formality. I asked if he understood that I would have been personally liable for over $400,000 in debt. He said he was sure his father would never let anything happen to me. I want you to understand something about that moment. It was not a dramatic moment. My voice did not rise. I did not cry. I simply understood, sitting across from this man I had loved for 3 years, that he did not fully see me. He saw the version of me that was agreeable and warm and willing to pour her savings into a life she was still being asked to prove herself worthy of joining. He had never considered that I might be the one who needed protecting. From his family's decisions, from his father's assumptions, from the very quiet way that love sometimes asks you to make yourself smaller until you disappear. I told him I needed some time to think. He said he hoped I would not make a mountain out of this. I drove home. I called my best friend. I told her I wanted to understand every option available to me. The following week was the longest of my adult life. My best friend pulled the full financial records on both properties. What she found was worse than the document had suggested. The balloon payment on the larger property was not just difficult to refinance. The property had 2 outstanding mechanics liens filed against it that had never been disclosed in any of the family's communications. Anyone who had signed that guarantee agreement would have inherited not just the debt, but the litigation risk attached to those liens. His father had known. She was confident of that. I called Marcus one more time. I told him what she had found. I told him specifically, with figures and document numbers, what signing that agreement would have meant for me financially. I asked him, one last time, whether he had known. He said the liens were a temporary issue that his father was handling. He asked me whether I trusted him or not. I said I trusted what I could verify. He said that was a terrible thing to say to someone you were supposed to marry. We did not speak again for 6 days. During those 6 days, my best friend filed a quiet title action on our shared property based on the documentation I had provided. The bank statements, the wire transfers, the emails. Under South Carolina law, a co-owner who contributes disproportionately to a purchase can petition to have the ownership interest reflect the actual contribution when there is clear documentation and no written agreement to the contrary. She was direct with me. It was not a guaranteed outcome, and it would take time, but the evidence I had preserved was strong. She also sent a letter, on her firm's letterhead, to his father's attorney, noting that the document presented to me at the dinner contained material omissions regarding the lien status of both properties, and that any attempt to enforce a signature obtained under those circumstances would constitute fraud in the inducement under state law. His father's attorney responded within 48 hours. The response was considerably less confident than I imagined his father had expected it to be. On the evening of the 6th day, Marcus called me. He said his father wanted to meet. I said I would be happy to meet and that I would be bringing my attorney. His father agreed. We met at a conference room in my best friend's office building. His father arrived with his own attorney, which told me he had understood, finally, that this had moved past a family conversation. He sat across the table from me, and for the first time since I had known him, he did not look like a man who expected the room to reorganize itself around him. My best friend laid out the documentation, the contribution records, the liens, the legal exposure the document would have created for me. She was precise and unhurried, and she did not raise her voice once. His father's attorney asked whether I was seeking damages. My best friend said we were seeking clarity on the ownership interests in the shared property, a written withdrawal of the guarantee request, and a full accounting of the lien status and any other undisclosed liabilities on any property the family had ever discussed with me in the context of our future. His father looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the table. The meeting lasted 1 hour and 17 minutes. When it ended, his father's attorney said they would be in touch. I thanked everyone for their time. I picked up my bag. I walked out. Marcus followed me to the elevator. He asked if there was any version of this where we could still move forward. I thought about that question seriously, the way it deserved to be thought about. I thought about who I was when I had walked into that engagement dinner, happy, hopeful, already imagining the rest of my life. I thought about his hand finding mine under the table and how much I had wanted that gesture to mean what I thought it meant. Then I thought about my name, already printed on a signature line I had never agreed to. I told him I hoped he found what he was looking for. I told him I genuinely did not say that to be cruel. I meant it. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. He did not follow. In the 3 weeks that followed, the title action proceeded. His father's attorneys, faced with clear documentation of my contribution and the paper trail of emails in which Marcus had explicitly acknowledged the funding split, did not contest it. The ownership interest in the property was formally recognized as 75% mine, reflecting the proportion of the purchase price I had contributed. I refinanced in my name alone within 60 days. The guarantee document was withdrawn in writing. The family's attorney cited an internal review of the property disclosures. He did not apologize. I sold my equity stake in the house 4 months later at a market price that returned me a profit I did not expect. I bought a smaller place on my own, closer to the water, with a back porch that gets the evening light just right. I found out later, through a mutual acquaintance, that his father had presented a similar document to the woman Marcus dated before me. She had signed it. She had spent the better part of 2 years trying to disentangle herself from the legal fallout after the smaller property defaulted on a contractor payment. She had not known when she signed what she was agreeing to. I think about her sometimes. In the months since, people have asked me what I wish I had done differently. The honest answer is not much about the ending. I wish I had read the pattern earlier, the way his father made financial decisions that affected everyone around him without consultation, the way Marcus had learned to call that love. I wish I had asked harder questions in year 1 instead of year 3, but I don't wish I had stayed. I don't wish I had signed. And I don't wish I had been quieter in that conference room. My best friend told me once that the most dangerous contracts are the ones that are presented as formalities. The ones where asking questions is reframed as distrust and hesitation is called a failure of commitment. She was talking about the legal document that night, but I think she was also talking about something else. I kept the porch furniture we had picked out together. It looks good in the new place. Most evenings, I sit out there with a cup of coffee and watch the sun go down over the marsh, and I think about the version of myself who almost signed her name to someone else's debt because she was afraid that asking questions meant she didn't love him enough. She deserved better. So did her money. I'm glad she found out in time.